for years, Donald Trump openly questioned whether President Obama was born in America. Spoiler alert, he was. Now that he's met Obama, President-elect Trump says he actually really likes him. For more, let's bring in our political panel, former White House press secretary for George W. Bush, Ari Fleischer, USA Today senior politics reporter Heidi Presbella, of course I mess up the Heidi, and Washington bureau chief for Time magazine, Michael Shearer, who wrote the cover story for the brand new Time Person of the Year, which in 2016 goes to Donald Trump. Thanks one and all for being here. Ari, let me start with you. The president-elect said of Obama that although they disagree on a lot of certain policies, he's taken President Obama's advice. Take a listen.
I never met him before this, and I never spoke to him before this. I do like him. I love getting his ideas. I take his recommendations very seriously, and there are some people that I will be appointing, and in one case have appointed, where he thought very highly of that person.
So obviously saying that, you know, he likes him, he's taking his advice. You have some insight into the world of the President's Club.
Yeah.
Does that surprise you?
You know, it does and it doesn't. In a year in which everything surprised everybody, why should we be surprised that these two are now getting along?
Right.
But it's really interesting. You know, Donald Trump said about himself that he has an ability to be boring, that he has ability to be differently than he acted on the campaign trail. You saw that when he went to Mexico and had that news conference with the head of the state of Mexico. And so on one level, it doesn't surprise me that now the two of them are able to figure it out. Now, for Donald Trump, though, I mean, for Barack Obama, it strikes me he is the ultimate lobbyist for his administration. He's got the ear of the next president. He's going to influence him to keep his policies.
And Michael, the president-elect, said he was honored to be named Times Person of the Year 2016, but he also did take some exception to the subhead there, president of the divided states of America. Take a listen.
It's divided. I'm not president yet, so I didn't do anything to divide.
So he really thinks he did nothing to divide anybody?
I think he really thinks that right now he's trying to unify, and that's what that message is. I think that's why he's praising President Obama so much. One of the first things he said to his advisors the day after the election was, I want to be the president for all Americans, why he's taken prosecuting Hillary Clinton off the table. I think it's a fact that, you know, he participated substantially in the very divisive campaign. But I think he's really trying, and you know, in our interview with him last week for the Person of the Year story, which is for better or worse the most influential person, so it's not strictly an honor. He was even then moderating a lot of his positions, saying, for instance, that he wants you know, to find out some accommodation for Dreamers, which is not something you would have heard him say on the campaign trail.
Certainly not. And while we're on the subject of congeniality and bipartisanship, I want to play some sound of Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell talking about Vice President Joe Biden, who served for decades in the Senate, obviously as Vice President, as President of the Senate, and was honored today at the Senate. Let's take a listen.
He's been blessed in many ways. He's also been tested, knocked down, pushed to the edge of what anyone could be expected to bear. But from the grip of unknowable despair came a new man, a better man, stronger and more compassionate.
It goes on from there, and it's really very, very moving. It is. We don't see a lot of that.
Well, Joe Biden is just likable, period, by members who served with him on both sides of the aisle, but particularly in the aftermath of the very public way that he suffered with the death of his son. And he was up on the Hill the other day to push this cancer, or to celebrate this cancer, advancement of this cancer legislation. And I think he had an emotional moment, and everybody could see that as well when he talked about, yes, maybe I will run again. And so again, it kind of brings out the humanity in Joe Biden, and that's not something that is a partisan thing. And I think that's to the credit of Joe Biden, that so many people feel about him that way, including Republican leaders in Congress.
Do you think that's credible at all, him running for president in 2020 at the age of 78?
I think Joe Biden will never stop. So whether he's actually running, you will never have an interview with Joe Biden where he says, I'm done for now, or I'm going to go retire, or I'm going back to the House, or I'm going to get a new Corvette. Joe Biden's entire career has been about pushing forward, and he's always, whenever he's asked that question, any scenario, always says he's in the running, he's in the hunt, he's a player. That's just who Joe Biden is.
He pedaled back on it a little
You hope he
bit
runs
today.
because you think he... Because
I want him, Bernie, Hillary, all to run again.
Something I really am curious about, Ari. You heard our segment earlier about conflict of interest watch, these potential conflicts that Trump, as a global business leader, assuredly will have. And they're already cropping up here and there. What would you advise him if you were one of his senior staffers right now?
He's got to get it right. Look, what Donald Trump needs is for a neutral observer, who are very few of them in this town, but somebody who is not for him or against him, to say he made that decision because he thought it was good for the country, not for his bottom line. And he needs to carve out that relationship so he is not making decisions where people can make that accusation against him. I'd start by making sure that his children don't go to meetings that are governmental or quasi-governmental. If you're going to have a separation, it needs to be a strong black line that does not get crossed.
What do you think?
The problem is, all right, today with his taxes, or with his stock, he's acknowledging that because that was potential conflict of interest, he sold them off. And yet those are not companies that he controlled and directly drew a paycheck from. And the ethics experts that I talk to say there's absolutely no way to remove the potential, not even for Trump, but for people down lower the food chain to get in trouble for quid pro quo and for conflict of interest, unless he does remove ownership, okay? Because what he's talking about right now is transferring controlling power to his kids. But he's still the owner, and that is the key, is the ownership. And I just don't get a sense from what we're seeing, at least publicly, unless there's something really big going on behind the scenes, that there's going to be a move. And especially now with the polls coming out saying that the public also doesn't think that he should do it. But if you read the Constitution, and the Emoluments Clause is pretty darn clear that any kind of gift from a foreign government, which could be classified simply by foreign officials staying at his hotels, is a violation of that clause.
All right, Michael, Ari, Heidi, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.